Hello, this is Alex from Evolutionary Athletics again. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about the loading parameters that we use in each phase of training. So the first phase we obviously talked about was strength. Generally speaking, in the strength training phase, I prefer to use loads in the 70 to 100% of your 1 rep max range. Generally perform 2 to 4 sets of 1 to 4 repetitions. For the most part, although that 70 to 100% is a wide range, I like to stay between 85 and 95% of your 1 rep max most of the time. Excuse me. I do use loads less than 85% and less than 80% on lighter days, which also incorporate higher volume, so more on that, closer to 4 sets, 4 reps, especially when I'm using special methods like accentuated eccentrics or isometric or pause repetitions. So the special methods that we use, again, accentuated eccentrics and pause reps. I also like to auto-regulate the volume. I don't use a fancy formula like DB Hammer and the InnoSport crew did. Basically like to go by feel. If we want to sound fancy, we can call it cybernetic periodization. But basically, if you come in and it's a heavy day and you're doing singles and you get 2 singles, as long as we fall in that 2 to 4 set range, I'm going to be happy. So if you get 2 pulls at 90% and you're just destroyed from the previous couple weeks of training, or life's just getting too stressful, that's okay. As long as we kind of get into that set range that I'm looking for and into the rep range I'm looking for, I'm not going to really worry about a workout that is just 2 singles. I will go ahead and accept that. So we auto-regulate volume based on how a person feels and how they're doing in the lift. They might come in feeling crappy and then start pulling or start squatting and get a couple good reps in, and maybe they start hitting their groove and we go through 4 singles or 4 doubles or something like that. So really just try to stay in that set and rep range. So for the weekly setup, the way I would set up a whole body weekly training week, basically I use 2 different variants. I use either the Cal Dietz method, which is detailed in his triphasic training book, or the Texas method. After playing around with both of the methods, I tend to prefer the Texas method. That's because I find that myself and my athletes don't feel quite as beat up as we do when we're going through the Cal Dietz method. So this chart kind of has the way each system has everything laid out. So in Cal Dietz's system, Monday is a moderate intensity, moderate volume day. So Monday's really going to kind of be that ball breaker kind of a workout. It's going to be the one that's really going to smash you. Wednesday is characterized by high intensity and low volume. And Friday is characterized by low volume and high intensity. So in Cal's system, there is no such thing as an easy day, because even if you have low intensity, we're going to smash you with high volume. Or we're going to smash you with high intensity but give you low volume, but you're still getting smashed. Or moderate, you're kind of getting a little bit of smashed on intensity and on volume. So it's a really, really intense program. It's really designed to overreach you. He does point out, either in books or lectures, that at the end of a 4-week to 6-week training cycle, you're definitely going to be overreached. Your joints are going to be achy. You're not really going to want to be looking forward to the workout. So if you use this method, just be aware of that. And when you start to feel kind of like you're burning out around weeks 4 through 6, just understand that that's part of the process. So those workouts are not going to be fun, and they're going to kind of suck. You will find if you use his system, when you transfer into the power phase, the first week of the power phase, you're still going to feel kind of lousy from the overreaching. Then around week 2, at the start of week 2 in the power phase, pretty much everybody starts to feel fresh, and the weight and the velocity of the bar, so bar speed, increases a ton in that second week once some of that overreaching kind of starts to dissipate. That fatigue kind of leaves your body. the weights start to fly pretty fast, and you see guys weeks 2 and 3 really starting to accelerate loads and looking really explosive. So it's hard when you're using Cal Dietz's system to not lose sight of the fact that, or this type of a loading scheme, to not lose sight of the fact that we are overreaching you on purpose, and you're going to feel pretty terrible. But once we get into the power and then the peaking phase, at the end of the power phase and in the peaking high velocity section, the weight's going to be jumping and you are going to be flying. So when doubt starts to creep in, you just have to really stay focused and stay the course. Another way of setting up the week would be the way that Ripito and Kilgore do in the Texas method. Again, whole body workouts. Monday is characterized by a moderate intensity, moderate volume day. So in the technical term of the Texas method, Monday is a 5 sets of 5 day. Wednesday is an active recovery day. So it's low intensity, low volume. Texas method is 2 sets of 5 at 80% of what you did on Monday. So, and you know, Monday is going to be what, 80% of your 1 rep max. So you're really talking like 60%, 70% here for 2 sets of 5. Not enough to create any fatigue, but enough load and work to kind of grease the groove, or, you know, really keep that firing and movement pattern ingrained in the nervous system without generating any fatigue. Friday becomes a high intensity, low volume day. So on Friday is very similar to the Wednesday in the Cal Dietz program. Basically, on Fridays in the true Texas method, you'd be working up to a new 5 rep maximum every Friday. So you'd be working up on your squat or your deadlift or whatever it is, and working up to that new 5 rep max. So you do 1 set of 5. So that's the Texas method with the sets of 5 and everything. You can apply the loading parameters that I had used or I had shown you earlier, 2 to 4 sets of 1 to 4 reps, and kind of break up the volume along these kinds of low, medium, and high, as well as the intensity, low, medium, and high, as far as percents go. I kind of am most recently preferring the way the Texas method kind of lays it out. Noticed, you know, when if we're squatting heavy 3 days a week, or we're pulling 3 days a week, or in Cal Dietz's system, and this isn't a slight on Cal, this may even just be my improper implementation of his program or something, but people just, after, you know, weeks 5 and 6, they're starting to kind of feel like their backs are kind of bothering them a little bit. You know, maybe I'm a little soft and I don't want to mess anyone's backs up. We're obviously trying to use perfect technique all the time. But, you know, for some people I feel like it may be a little too intense. So if you switch to the Texas method, both of these are intermediate to intermediate advanced based setups. The Wednesday workout, we still get some work in, but we're not really loading the spine up too much, so that takes some of the achiness out of the back. We still get the 2 most important workouts, the moderate, and the high-low workout. So the Texas method, and you know, when we think about gains coming from strength in terms of hypertrophy and in terms of neural gains, strength tends to last longer. So if as long as Friday's workout, we're just getting stronger and stronger every Friday, I don't necessarily see the need to try to smash ourselves all 3 days. As long as we're getting stronger, the long-term delayed training effect is going to take hold and take root, so the subsequent phases will be, you know, just as effective. You just might not feel quite as beat up. The power phase. This is 55 to 80% of your 1 rep max. Why 80%? We went over the force velocity curve and how it's kind of got an S shape as opposed to you know, kind of the diagonal shape that everyone's most familiar with, and that's based off of Paavo Komi's research. So that shows us that maximal power can be produced at up to 80% of your 1 rep max. If you look through Mel Siff's research, he found max force and power around 60-66%. If you talk to Louis Simmons, he's going to tell you somewhere in the 50 to 70% range. If you go through practical programming with Ripito, they're going to say 55 to 75%. So 55 to 80 is pretty close to around where people think, you know, most of your power comes from. The two different set and rep protocols. The first one kind of adapted from Cal Dietz, 4 to 6 sets of 2 to 5 reps. The second one is a little more Louis Simmons-ish, also very similar to the sets and reps that they use for the dynamic effort method in practical programming. 6 to 10 sets of 2 to 3 reps. So when we're training in the power phase, we're going to go ahead and use compensatory acceleration training. So that means a fast eccentric, minimal pause, and an explosive concentric. So we're trying to move the bar as fast as possible on the way down and on the way up. We're really trying to steepen that force absorption curve, or the eccentric rate of force development, because the more force, the greater our eccentric rate of force development, the greater or the stronger the contraction is on the concentric phase. So rapid eccentric, explosive concentric. We use our eye to determine during this phase to determine some of the special methods that might be needed for an upcoming cycle. So kind of to elaborate on that, this is the phase and the velocity phase as well, where we're watching how they move and we're thinking, hey, this guy might need a little more eccentric strength, so maybe we'll use the accentuated eccentric technique during the next strength phase. Or, oh, this guy, he has a real rapid eccentric, but then he just kind of stops there and doesn't do anything for what looks like a split second before he starts to explode out of his cut or explode out of the bottom of the squat. So this guy might need, you know, eccentric and isometric methods in the next strength phase. So we're watching how they move in the power phase and the velocity phase to figure out what special methods we want to use in the next strength phase for the athlete, so we can shore up any of their weaknesses, whether it be eccentric strength or isometric strength. We also use special methods in the power phase. Besides the compensatory acceleration, we can do drop, catch, and hold, as well as a drop, catch, and explode. So drop, catch, and hold, that's kind of that, you know, you can think of Adam Archuleta's bench press, where he drops the barbell, catches it at his chest, and holds it for a couple seconds before you explode up. Or we could drop, catch, and explode. Drop the bar, catch it at the chest, and as soon as you catch it, boom, explode that weight back up to the top. These methods are also used for things, you know, drop, catch, and hold would be like altitude drops. Step off a block, land, stick the landing. If we know we want to use depth jumps in our peaking phase, we do the drop, catch, and hold technique here. And then, so that would be altitude drops. And then in the velocity phase, we could go ahead and do depth jumps, which is the drop, catch, and explode method. So really, these are just plyometric methods. And in the power phase, most of the time they're going to be weighted, or we're going to work, since the goal is power in this phase, we're going to work off of higher boxes. So the goal is going to be to do altitude landings and increase the box height, you know, from 12 to an 18 and 18 to a 24. So we're going to really try and increase that force and power production during this phase. Finally, we get to our peaking phase. The percents are 25 to 55%. We generally use 3 to 5 sets, and this is something I picked up from Cal, and that is that the reps are going to be based on time. That way we can target the specific energy system required for their sporting activity. One day you're going to use shorter times than required in your sport. One day you're going to use times that are equal to your sport demand, and then finally one day you're going to use times that are longer than your sport requires. So with that in mind, for example, football, one day you can do 5-second sets. That would be, you know, maybe close to sport demand. One day you'll use shorter times, so that's gonna, maybe you'll do sets of 3 seconds, and one day you'll do longer times, maybe you go 8 to 10 seconds. In ice hockey, maybe the longer times, maybe 25 to 35 seconds. For the longer times, equal times maybe 20 seconds, and shorter times maybe 10-15 seconds. And the idea is, the shorter times, the goal is to really increase just the velocity at which you're moving, so to teach you how to move at a higher velocity than you can during your sport, because fatigue is no longer going to be a limiting factor. On the times equal to sport demand, we're just specifically targeting the energy system that your sport requires. So we're going to try and take that speed that you develop during the shorter times and try to carry that over and improve your work capacity to match the sport. Finally, the day where you're using times that are longer than your sport requires, that's going to be a conditioning intensive kind of day. That's going to be the day where we really try to increase your work capacity for your sport. So one day, the shorter days aimed at improving your overall velocity and speed of movement, and it should allow you to use a higher work rate than any of the other days. The longer days intended to improve your conditioning and ability and work capacity in your sport. And finally, the time that equals the sport demand is to specifically train for your sport's requirements. In this method, we'll use the compensatory acceleration as well as the drop, catch, and explode method. So this would be depth jumps. If you're used to, you would do things like reactive squats in this phase. If you're used to the InnoSport type speak, where you pick your feet up, free fall into the ground, smack the ground, and explode out of the hole with a light weight on your back, 30% of your 1 rep max. So you're free falling, catching, and boom, exploding out of the hole. Before you try that method, in the power phase, work on just a drop and catch in your squat. So work on pick your feet up, boom, stick the landing, and hold for a couple seconds. So everything should follow a logical progression. And if you're going to use an advanced method like drop, catch, and explode, you want to spend some time laying the foundation and working on that drop, catch side of the equation with the exact same exercise you're going to use for the drop, catch, and explode phase. So if we're in the power or the velocity / peaking phase, I prefer Cal Dietz's layout, because in this phase, the neural requirements are really high, but the loads and everything are light enough to where we're not really going to see the back or anything fatigue. All of that overreaching has dissipated, so the body should be feeling really good during these phases, so they can handle the more intense loading structure that Cal Dietz has set up. So that would be Monday being a moderate day, Wednesday being a high intensity, low volume, and Friday being low volume, high intensity. Or, sorry, low intensity, high volume. So Wednesday is high intensity, low volume. Friday is low volume, high intensity. And that is my presentation for you. Thank you.